3000.
What is doing? My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by a DJ, a musical tastemaker, Shan Frenzie. Thanks for coming, man.
Maloney, good to be here, man.
I appreciate it.
Really excited. This is funny because I'm normally on the other side of the desk, having done many interviews myself. I'm usually not the one answering the questions, so this could go either way. Who knows?
I think you'll enjoy the experience, man. I'm a pretty easy dude to talk to. I think you'll find.
Yeah, you are, mate. You are. Let's do it.
When you said you've done plenty of episodes, like just early, before we jump into your story, you've been podcasting for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So how many episodes do you think you've done?
Look, I don't know. My radio show, Groove Therapy, which I do up in Sydney on 2SER, that started in 2002. I was podcasting that show really early on. So I don't know what the statistics are, but I'd like to say I'm probably one of Australia's earliest podcasters.
Which is phenomenal, man.
I was really into creating the RSS feed really early on and kind of exploring that whole geeky side of podcasting before it became a big thing. So I don't really know how many episodes. I never numbered them, but I do a radio show every week of the year. So 23 years in now.
Crazy, man. Nuts. So those early days, though, that you were podcasting for people to stream on their iPod, that was sort of what it was.
That's right.
Yeah, which is where the podcast name comes from, I guess, and now it's just gone a different direction.
That's right. Yeah, it was really important to me that I love doing radio so much, but I knew that 2SER really only had a small captive audience in Sydney, and I wanted more people to hear the show. So that's why I wanted to explore on demand and RSS feeds.
Global reach.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's it, man. You get people downloading it from all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
All right, so let's jump into your story, man. I'm sure we've got so much to fucking talk about. I know you grew up around Camberwell. Do you want to tell us how you got involved in music as a young Shan?
Sure. Well, there's the hip-hop answer, I guess, and the family answer, the family life answer. So my parents, well, my father particularly, was always involved in music. So I was always listening to music from a very early age. He was a musician in a pretty well-known band. And DJing was just something that was always around me, I guess.
Yep.
From a very early age. Recording studios, I was always around recording studios. And it just seemed like a very natural thing for me to be excited about.
Yep.
To be into.
So the musical equipment is around, and you're watching people record, and so it's just second nature to you, really, to start playing music.
Yeah, absolutely. Dad was really pushing me to play an instrument, to play guitar and saxophone, which I did in my early high school years. And eventually I gravitated to the turntables. I don't know if you want to call that an instrument or not, but...
Was he embracing that, though?
Yeah, he was. He likes to joke about it, but yeah, I guess that happened at an age where I was discovering my own musical tastes and getting into hip hop, and by that point, he was happy with it.
Yeah, he's just happy for you to do something musical and creative in general.
Yeah.
And I guess that the whole hip hop thing and DJing was pretty new. I'm guessing this is around the early 80s.
Yeah, so I guess my first introduction to hip-hop would have been Saturday mornings watching Sounds. Was it Sounds? What was the TV show on Channel 7 with Donnie Sutherland? It was kind of like a countdown show, but it was on Saturday mornings. I think it was called Sounds. I want to say Sounds Unlimited, but that's Rosanna's group. So it was a show where they would play film clips, and Donnie Sutherland was a well-known Melbourne DJ at that time, and he did this show, and they would play Grandmaster Flash the Message. So I guess that was my first introduction to that. So Dad used to watch that show with me if he was home, and that kind of introduced me to this world of hip-hop, I guess, seeing that iconic film clip shot in New York, and the Furious Five all dressed up in their wacky leathers, and it was all very street and weird.
And lyrically, it still stands up.
It was amazing. And look, I was really young at the time, and obviously a couple of years later, it's a pretty similar trajectory to what so many kids my age went through. You know, there was Beat Street and there was Breakdance, the movies, soaking all that music in, collecting the tapes. That set me on the path.
Yeah. Your story is slightly different because you're in a musical family. You've got the musical stuff there, so it's a different approach, I guess, to some people who might grow up without that sort of stuff. So you've got the accessibility to it, which makes that little part of it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of weird having sort of grown up around recording studios and people in the music industry. I just thought that's how everyone grew up. Like, don't we all go to recording studios and hang out with our parents as they record records?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was exciting. And look, you know, I grew up with a good friend of mine, Chad, who a similar age. We were collecting hip-hop tapes and, you know, as young kids hitting the record button on the stereo and recording fakey radio shows and, you know, doing
I think everyone did that at some stage.
Yeah. But I probably took it a little bit more seriously than many other kids.
Yeah. So so you said you were doing music at school, you did the sax and all that sort of stuff. And then at what stage did you feel like you wanted to really push the DJing thing as not career, but as a full-time passion?
Yeah, look, it was pretty early on. I think my first gig, I was 16 years old, and my parents used to drive me to my gigs. I would do local parties in the area, or, you know, it's quite funny. The girl that would be the receptionist at my after-school job, I would do her 21st birthday, and that was my first gig. Mm-hmm. And I must have turned up with like 2 crates of hip hop. She wasn't into hip hop at all. You know, I'm playing my hip hop. I'm pretty sure that gig ended badly, but you know.
But that was the thing back then. I guess you were just like, well, this person DJs. There's not a lot of DJs out there, so this is what you get.
And I was following people like Ransom and you know, watching what Peril and Kano and all that crew were doing. That might have been a couple of years later. I think really my first introduction into taking hip-hop DJing seriously would have been listening to DJ C on the radio. 3CR, he used to have this radio show every Wednesday night called Radiohead. And that was the first time I discovered hip-hop on the radio. And when I heard DJ C playing, you know, tunes and mixing and cutting it up on radio, and he was a local Melbourne guy, that made me realize, oh, gee, like, I can do this. Like, this sounds like a lot of fun. And it really opened me up to there are people in this city. There's a whole kind of scene happening that I can get involved with here.
Yeah. Did you ever meet him?
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Well, a couple of years later, absolutely. He DJ C is a great character, and he's someone you should have on the show. Actually,
yeah, for sure.
He's the precursor, I guess, to what DJ Chrissy was doing on PBS. So DJ C had his show on 3CR. He eventually moved to PBS and got Chrissy on board, and Chrissy did her infamous Step Into the AM show.
Yeah.
They were good times, though. You know, they were really, really pivotal times. Listening to DJ C, listening to Wheels of Steel on Triple R. That was another hip hop show that was happening around 88 or 87. Going into those shows and meeting people in the scene and connecting, it was great.
And where are you acquiring records from back then? Because I'm imagining that's pretty tough.
Central Station.
That was the go-to spot.
And that and Missing Link, I think, and Collector's Corner were the two spots. And my parents' record collection too. You know, I was really blessed that my parents had really big record collections, and they were situated right near my bedroom door. So quite often I'd just go digging in my parents' collection and be pulling out Billy Cobham or David Sanborn, or just some crazy jazz funk fusion or rock or psych kind of stuff. It was great. It was a real introduction to learning about records.
Are you sampling them at that stage, or are you just playing?
Really early on. Doing tape loops. My father would drop, you know, various bits of studio equipment into my room and say, yeah, here's a really early sampler, or here's some kind of digital delay unit that has 8 seconds of memory, and you can trigger it with a MIDI a MIDI thingy, and
Because they've used it and they don't need it anymore.
yeah, exactly. It's been in his studio for a while. He's moved on to something else. He knows that I'm getting excited by this stuff. So yeah, I was pretty early on with that, learning about sampling and looping and creating little tapes.
Yep.
But I didn't really know anyone at that point. It wasn't until maybe listening to PBS that I would connect with people and really start getting into that early local Melbourne hip hop scene.
Is that through the sort of graffiti scene?
Yeah, well, Chrissy's show in particular. Well, I think Chrissy's show was on a Saturday night. DJ Idem had a show on after that as well. So quite often Idem would be in Chrissy's show, and so I'd be tuning in every week. And everyone from around Melbourne would call up. That was the big thing back in the day. Everyone would tune into these radio shows, call up, do their shout outs. I was one of those kids. And got talking to Idem, and Idem said, look, he found out that I was getting into DJing, and he said, look, I've got these rappers that need a DJ. Do you want to come and meet us and connect? So I did. And that turned out to be Raf Boogie from Aswan, and Beaker, who Beaker and Idem had a group called Positive Direction. So I kind of got to meet these other like-minded kids that were really into making demos and tapes. And
because realistically, there wasn't too many people making their own sample-based hip-hop in Melbourne, was there?
There was a few, but there was a really early scene. There was us, Idem, Positive Direction. There was a group called Code of Ethics, which was Ennio Styles, who does styling on Triple R these days, and his rapper Pluto. Mad Hat was a rapper that I used to hang out with a lot, and we used to record a lot of tracks together. Reason, his group Enemy, he was really early on as well. Obviously Ransom and AKA Brothers and Mama's Funk, they were kind of the guys that we looked up to.
There's a handful of them. It wasn't a huge.
It wasn't huge, and no one was putting out records at that point, apart from Ransom. Ransom had his
AKA, I think 89 they put out.
Yeah, 88 I think it was. Yeah.
So and that must be cool to be a part of something that's so new and emerging, and just like we're doing something that hasn't really happened. You're just emulating what you're seeing overseas.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, and we're just, at that point, we're putting songs together where, the guys are writing their raps through the week. They're coming around to my house and recording these shitty songs, these shitty demos. And then we'd go into the radio shows and play them that week.
So you're recording, just to scratch my little musical nerd itch, are you recording them onto tape?
Yeah.
Because there's no digital here.
No, I had a reel-to-reel as well.
Wow.
So, I'd record them onto reel-to-reel and then bounce channels down. And they were terrible. I would never, ever play these songs to anyone these days, but it was fun at the time. And if you were there, you got the chance to hear them on radio, and that was exciting.
I guess some people might have some tapes of the radio recordings.
They do, yeah.
Really?
And I hope they never come to light, ever.
Really? Do people message you like, I've got this?
I'm looking at you, Paz.
Really? Has he got them?
He's got it all, yeah.
What? Oh,
yeah.
Right. So he was nerding out early and just recording all that.
Paz was recording all those tapes, and he has put some of those songs on the internet, and they're available should you go looking for them.
Has anyone said, I don't like that?
I think we probably have all said it.
He doesn't care. There you go. Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah.
It's out there.
But it was part of history. Look, that was part of Melbourne hip-hop. I should mention PMP as well. They were really early on. And I had a pretty interesting connection with PMP, who were affiliated with RDC Crew, Prowler. And in early high school, Link, one of the members of PMP, me and Link were in a little band in high school together. And he was responsible for feeding me some really early hip-hop tapes. And kind of allowing me to really catch that hip-hop bug. Yeah.
I guess with your dad travelling a bit musically, that would have opened your eyes a little bit as well. Did you get to go with him on any tours and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I'd go over to the States and to Japan and see the band play huge stadiums and support really, really big names. And that was pretty amazing. That was great.
And but he wanted you to follow in that musical footstep in that capacity, but that wasn't the way that you wanted to go. The band thing wasn't for you.
I think he was happy that I was just doing what I liked to do at that point.
Cool.
You know, he was getting a kick out of me playing guitar and saxophone and then seeing my own path into music.
Yeah.
He just wanted me to stay employed, I guess. I don't know.
That's cool. Did you ever sample your own saxophone?
No. I dropped saxophone by that point. Yeah.
I feel like saxophone comes back every 20 years. It has like a kitschy sort of comeback.
I would love to play sax again. I'd love to pull that out again. I don't own one these days. I do own a guitar, but yeah.
Is it all the lung capacity? Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly. Getting that embouchure right.
Right, yeah. So talking about those early recordings, who's come into your place? Are you still in Camberwell there?
Yeah. So Camberwell, that's my dad's house. Look, Idem, Beaker, who is...
And you're still a teenager at this stage.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Beaker was Shawnee B from The Statesman. Who else was there? Mad Hat. Mad Hat was a really great friend of mine back then, a very talented MC in Melbourne who, frankly, just doesn't get enough props, really, for being as talented as he was. And then as the years progressed, there were, people like Brad Strutt and Tram and Rays and all those boys would come over.
So how did the connection happen with those guys? Is that through the graph thing?
With Brad used to go to the same high school. So I went to Camberwell High, and then I went to Swinburne. So Brad was a couple of years younger than me, and he would go to Camberwell High. But I was so close to Camberwell High that I didn't need to catch the train. I would just walk there. But by the time I was going to Swinburne, I would catch the train, and I would see Brad on the train, and I'd be like, "Oh, you're that kid from Camberwell High," and he'd be listening to some hip hop and would trade some tapes on the train, and I'd say, "Hey, I live up the road at Williston Station. Come up and let's listen to some tapes and whatever." So Brad came up then, and he used to come up almost every night, and started recording raps at my crib.
Did you always see potential?
Absolutely, yeah. Brad, look, he was always talented, always. Yeah, great MC. So I had the privilege of seeing him from the very beginning, just really come into his own. Rays and Trem, that was through a trip to Geelong. And this is really testing my memory. I was down in Geelong doing some graffiti for some reason, which was something I didn't really do too often, but I was kind of involved in a lot of that scene. And Trem came along and was watching us, and we just connected. And at some point, he came to Melbourne and hung out at my place. And I think I may have hung out at his place or Razor's place in Geelong that particular weekend. And that was where we kind of just forged the relationships.
Yeah, he credits you for bringing together Geelong and Melbourne in that capacity.
Yeah, right. I guess in many ways I did. I think my place was just a place where a lot of people would come together. And, having Rays and Trem come to my house, and they get to meet Brad, and then some years down the line, Lyrical Commission is born from that meeting, I guess.
So you were indirectly or directly responsible for the formation of LC.
Well, it was completely up to them, but it was great because, I got to see those guys at their very early formation, and we recorded a lot of really wacky songs and, did a lot of gigs in Melbourne before they were who they would become.
When everybody was a solo performer, like a solo
Rays and Trem were a duo at that point.
Yep.
And I kind of slotted in as their DJ for that period of time. At the same time, I was DJing for Mad Hat, and we kind of had a little duo going.
Because you were rapping a little bit too.
I've been known to, but I'm not a rapper. No. Yeah. I'm a DJ. I would jump on the mic on occasion. There's a really embarrassing tape, going back to Paz's embarrassing tape collection. There's a recording of me, Peril, and Idem rapping on PBS or Triple R or something, which is, a bit of a laugh. 3
DJs all rapping.
I think that's what Paz might have labelled it, actually.
Really? I got to get this stuff. All right. Yeah, it's funny though, man. But yeah, okay. co- again, with the musical nerdy sort of stuff, how were you DJing these gigs when, like, this is obviously a long time before Serato.
Yeah.
And you're bouncing the stuff down onto tape, but how are you playing the gigs live with the original instrumentals?
Well, they weren't. No, I would use vinyl, and I would use, rather than just play instrumentals, I would be backspinning the breaks. It was when I met DJ Item, who he really taught me how to DJ in a hip hop style. Before that, I was collecting records, buying my records from Brashes and playing pop music at, whatever young girl's birthday was happening that weekend or whatever it was. But when I met Item, I used to go around to his place. He was really early on with the hip-hop style of DJing. He taught me how to get 2 copies of the same record and loop them live on the turntables. He had the collection of Ultimate Breaks and Beats, which I just soaked up, bought my own set of those. I would just practice on those things for hours and hours and hours. So when we did live shows with MCs, I'd be pulling out double copies of whatever record that I had doubles of, really. Yeah.
So they're different beats to what they're recording in the studio, but more or less it's a similar sort of thing.
And yeah, exactly. And that's right. When we're doing shows, I mean, these demo tapes that we used to record these songs were pretty messy and horrible. Yeah, look at it. It is what it is.
Yeah. But yeah, because I just often wonder that. I'm like, how would they have done that? And you're going to go and press 1 record or 2 records just to go tour, but
Yeah, I think that came a few years later when people got really serious about it. We weren't quite at that point yet. We were writing the rule book at that point.
Yeah.
We were the first to be doing this. We were watching what Ransom was doing and kind of following his lead, I guess.
Yeah. And that's it. There's no rules, and that's when the most interesting stuff happens. When you're sort of just you go, well, what? There's no direction, so we'll just fucking make it up.
Yeah, and I used to go digging down at the Camberwell markets every Sunday religiously. 6 a.m. I'd be down there looking for records, and that was really, really early on. And I found a lot of great records down there. So quite often I'd get double copies of some crazy Blue Note record and just be cutting those up, and that would be the foundation for whatever song that we might record and play on PBS that week or whatever it was.
Yeah, it's like you make it that week and then you go put it out there, see if people dig it, and if they don't, it's gone.
That's right.
And then Paz brings it out 25 years later.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the sampling that you're able to use there, you still, what you're saying, like you got like 8-second loops and that sort of thing, and I guess you've got... Yeah, it's way before my time, so I just like hearing about it.
Yeah, sure. So my dad would drop off various bits of equipment, and I had different samplers at different times, depending on what was in my bedroom, or synthesizers or drum machines. So it was just a combination of what was in my bedroom at that time, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually I moved into, I had a little Amiga computer and used the Fast Tracker program on that thing and put out something a little bit more polished than what I'd previously done, because then you could really multi-track different samples and sequence them.
What do you think, when you're making these early recordings and it's pretty new, you're breaking new ground, do you think that it's potentially... commercial? Just doing it. That is no one's thinking like
we're just emulating what we listen to, wherever, if it's Run DMC or Busy Bee or Bismarcky or what Marley Marl's doing or whatever. We're just making our own versions of that. Yeah.
For fucking fun.
Yeah, man, we're kids.
People like it. They like it. So eventually you move out, and who do you move out with? What do you do there?
Yeah. So I eventually moved out of home and get a place with Len One. Len was a good mate of mine, still is. And Sabbath, who's a well-known graph writer.
I know him.
Yeah. So the three of us had a place in Richmond, right near Richmond Station, and that was kind of a notorious house for that time. We all would get up to lots of mischief and trouble and make beats and that kind of thing.
Richmond really was the mecca then, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We were really, really close to the Corner Hotel. So people just used to come from Richmond Station and crash the house, really.
Yeah. And there was the whole sort of writer's bench thing that was happening at Richmond as well. And I've said this before, but the way that the train's elevated, it feels like it's got a bit of a New York vibe
Yeah, absolutely.
to it.
Yeah,
The whole thing, and the hip-hop culture sort of gravitated towards there.
And it's funny because we used to joke that the writer's bench kind of extended into our lounge room at that point in time.
Yeah.
There was a lot of writers coming through the house.
I'm guessing there was some pretty bombed walls from Richmond Station to your place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had the cops come around a couple of times.
But you would have had all sorts of heads there and all different sort of riders and that sort of thing. Bit of an open door policy.
But it was great. I mean, that was just such an important time in Melbourne. Melbourne was really killing it in terms of graph. There were panels running. I was running. Like, I was never really a huge participant in graph myself. I would mess around with it and get up to some mischief with my friends, but I was lucky that a lot of my friends were really talented and quite well known.
Yep.
Got a shout out to Epic as well, someone that I had known for many years by that point, and come up in a few little graph crews. We all kind of came together under the RFK banner, which was Trem's crew from Geelong, and we brought that to Melbourne, and there was a whole bunch of us.
And a lot of people from that crew went on to do all sorts of different stuff.
Yeah. Look, it was an amazing crew because I look back at those on those times and realize that there were so many people in our crew that did go on to do important things. Trem obviously did what he did. Len went up to Brisbane and started working with Lazy Grey and Bias under Brother Stoney, and I kind of took my path. So it was great. There's Item was RFK, so he kind of did what he did. There was a bunch of us that went on to do things. So, yeah.
Went on to do things. Well, no, you were just creative kids that would, hadn't figured out your own paths. And, some people went down a design and artistic path. Other people went down a musical path.
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff. But, yeah, the base was just creative kids that all shared a similar interest.
And it was at a time where Australian hip-hop was really starting to come into its own. This is pre-Hilltop Hoods. This is pre all these records coming out at fast, accelerated paces. It was before all of that. It's just us kind of figuring it all out.
Figuring it out,
yeah.
So what time we were talking now? Sort of mid-90s?
Early. Yeah. It'd be like late 80s to early 90s.
90s. So it's just a different time in the musical landscape.
Yeah.
Because everything at that stage on the radio was still pretty much rock heavy and a bit alternative. There was hip hop creeping in, but it was more like novelty sort of shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But we were listening to community radio though. That was it. Yeah.
But just the idea of having a song that people are going to listen to or getting it played on anything but community radio or selling it in anywhere besides these niche stores just wasn't on anyone's radar.
No, absolutely not.
No, you just made it because you fucking loved it.
Yeah, that's what we did. We just wanted to be like our heroes.
And at this stage, you're doing more DJ gigs that you're interested in rather than Sally's 21st birthday?
Yeah. Well, I guess my time in Melbourne was pretty early on in my DJ career. I think, my first residency was at a place called Ruby Red. I had a hip hop night.
Where was that?
Ruby Red was in the city. It was in the basement of a jazz club. Okay. It was the exact address, I just don't recall. But the flyers are out there. Uh-huh. So I had this night with a mate of mine, Matt, and that may have lasted like 4 or 5 weeks before we all got kicked out of the venue because the toilets would get bombed, which was always the case back then. But it wasn't until I moved to Brisbane that I really started to get very serious about DJing and actually start making money from it.
Yeah, so then, because obviously there's a big scene here. Well, not a big scene, but there's a scene. And there's a hub in Richmond where you're a massive part of. Then deciding to go to Brisbane, that's like sort of, were you expecting to find the same sort of thing? Were you going up there just thinking, it's time for a change?
Yeah, that. Before moving to Brisbane, I had started a group called Acapulco Gold, which was a bit of a collaboration between me, Mad Hat, Ennio Styles, and Pluto from Code of Ethics. So the 4 of us came together. We recorded a little bit more seriously. So there's a couple of really cool songs that that we did in those times. This must have been about 1992, I think. We had the opportunity to do some gigs up in Brisbane. So we toured Brisbane, had a great time up there, got to meet the locals up there and connect with the local scene. And maybe 12 months later, Len One and myself decided to move to Brisbane, both for different reasons. But we kind of landed essentially around the same time. Yeah. And, lived in the same household for a period of time.
In like sort of right in the city there?
In Brisbane, yeah. We connected with a couple called Felicity and Hams. So Hams is a really respected graph writer up there. Felicity was his partner at the time. They were both running a lot of hip-hop jams in Brisbane, and we just moved in with those guys, and they gave us a bit of a platform to get started.
So instantly you're in the scene. You didn't have to go looking for it. It was just you were straight in there.
Yeah, pretty much. And I was always really fascinated by what happens around the country as well. Years before that, when I was still in high school, would see Vapors magazine from Sydney, and then eventually Hype magazine from Brisbane. So I used to collect those magazines, and I'd always be fascinated by the names, seeing Blaze. Who's Blaze up in Sydney who does this Vapors magazine? And DJ Catch from Brisbane. And these people were just like rock stars to me. It seems like such a big, vibrant community. Dash and the guys over in Perth, they had a magazine called Bits and Pieces, the Madcap artist. This is around the same time as Vapors and Hype magazine. So I really loved seeing those names, and then eventually getting to connect with those people was really cool and exciting. So moving to Brisbane, I got to connect with Catch, and we became really close mates and did a lot of DJing together.
It must have been cool to take your Melbourne musical style up there, and you and Len probably are DJing, I'm guessing, at the same time.
Len wasn't really DJing at that point. Len? No, he was certainly collecting records. And look, Len absolutely he's always been a huge wealth of knowledge for music. And he put me onto so much music, and he'll say the same thing about me as well. So it really was reciprocal. We taught each other so much, just about so many different records. He wasn't really DJing at that point, I don't recall. Connecting with Hams and Felicity, and then Catch had his radio show, and had, with me bringing my Melbourne flavour, I guess you could say, into Brisbane, it probably did afford me a few opportunities that maybe some of the local Brisbane DJs didn't get a chance to take advantage of.
And you're like, this is how we do it down south, man.
Well, this is it. I mean, I was a student of people like Ransom and Peril and Kano, like some of the best in the country.
Yeah. So you fit in right there, and you enjoy it. It's just like you found the scene.
Loved it.
The weather's better.
Yeah. And moving up to Brisbane really opened up my eyes musically as well. Discovering, it was at a time where acid jazz was starting to become a thing, so I wasn't playing all hip hop. I could incorporate all these other sounds. I could play my Blue Note records alongside some hip hop, alongside Galliano or Corduroy or the Brand New Heavies or whatever it is, DJ Shadow, that kind of thing. It is really, really early releases. I found myself getting a residency at a really well-known kind of techno club up there, but I would play in the back room. And that was the start of my apprenticeship, I guess, in Brisbane as a DJ.
Did you have to prove yourself again, did you?
Well, I was pretty lucky that I had those gigs in Brisbane. I got to... I've got to give shout-outs to a guy called Johnny Griffin, who's a DJ up in Brisbane, who's one of Brisbane's longest-running DJs, and possibly in Australia. He was quite a bit older than me. He's in his 70s nowadays. So he'd been playing around since the 70s, early 80s. He really took me under his wing when I moved to Brisbane. And I guess he saw in me that, like, this enthusiasm to DJ. I was really into the music. I was already starting to learn how to manipulate crowds and read crowds. And then he taught me how to finesse that, how to really work the room.
With selection, with the way you blend
everything. How to drop mix, how to program the night, how to look out at the crowd and spot people and go, you need to look after these people. These are the people that are, will get the room happening. Yeah, he was great. And because he was a really well-known DJ in Brisbane, and I get to tag along and play his gigs, and eventually we have a residency together that was really, really popular. So it was great.
It's a different aspect to DJing to what you were previously doing, which was collecting music that you liked and playing music that you liked. Now you're catering to a crowd, you're building a dance floor, and you're in control of the night from a more commercial perspective.
Yeah, well, I always play music that I like. I've never been the kind of DJ where I play music I don't like. That's important. It just so happens that I like a lot of music, and I think one of the detrimental things for me in Melbourne growing up in the hip hop scene was it was very insular. Like you had to play hip hop, and if you kind of broke out of that and played something that might have been a little bit questionable to some people, it was a bit frowned upon at that time. When I moved to Brisbane, I broke out of that mentality, and I could play R&B and I could play whatever it is amongst all this other great music. And I just became a DJ, not necessarily a hip-hop DJ.
Yep. And this is mid-90s now?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So you're still using records and sort of CDs?
No, before CDs.
So it's
all vinyl. Vinyl.
Record pools, or what? Are you just literally buying 112 and using that like?
Yeah. Well, look, I was getting a lot of promos. Catch and myself would hit up the record labels every week, and they would feed us promos and service us. I was DJing a lot with Johnny Griffin, a lot with Catch. Catch had his radio show. That was a really, really important hip hop radio show in Brisbane, and I was part of that crew for that period of time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, records were just coming, I guess. It was the lifestyle. We just bought records. And if we didn't buy them, we were given them.
Because I think in like the late 90s, like the rack mount, Denon CD players come out, and they become a bit of a standard for a while.
Yeah.
Did you embrace that stuff?
Eventually, I was in Sydney at that point. But yeah, eventually I go down the digital rabbit hole, but I've always been a big vinyl collector. But that's purely because, maybe I'd be working on an edit of a track, and, you're not going to press that up on vinyl, but you can burn it to a CD and do that. But I was always a big vinyl head. Yeah.
And it looks cooler.
Heaps cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It wasn't until Pioneer get the platters, you think like, this almost feels like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
The rack mount one was the little...
Yeah, you have to press that button, and you've got to nudge the left and right. Yeah. But we did that, and but mostly it was all vinyl. Yeah.
So you stay in Brisbane for how long? In Brizzy?
I think I was in Brizzy for 4 years, and that was a really great period. It really was when I got to take DJing super seriously, make a bit more of a name for myself. Because I think if I'd stayed in Melbourne, it just would have been a lot harder to break into professional DJing. I wanted to be playing the venues that people like Kano and Peril and all those guys were playing. The Lounge, we used to go to the Lounge all the time. And that might have eventually happened, but I think I sort of Brisbane afforded me a way into that world
because it's a smaller community.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, and having Johnny Griffin take me under his wing and just show me the ropes, how to become a real DJ.
Do you remember when you first met him and how that connection sort of happened?
Yeah, through the nightclub called the Dome, which was the big sort of techno club in Brisbane at the time. And I would play in the back room, and he would frequent the venue, and we just would hang out, and he could see that this is what I wanted to do, and the
passion. He could see the passion that you had. Yeah.
He was a mentor in many, many ways. He still is. He used to do these nights called Flares, which would be him all night playing 70s or 80s New Romantic or Manchester or synth pop stuff, and this would be 1993, and he'd just clean up on those nights up in Brisbane. They were really, really well known. So I used to go along and watch him do that. I just learned so much from him.
Yeah, it was a totally different time where the DJs and the promoters could actually really do well, because There's no social media. There's no
No.
way for people to communicate any other way. You go to this club because this is what's popping off on that night. And if you don't go, then you wait till next week on the same night and you go.
Yeah, and everyone kind of knew about it. There was the street press magazines. They were really important back then. That doesn't happen these days.
No.
You know?
There's a Beat magazine over there. They're still pressing it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I remember that stuff from my early nightclub years. Like you had to pay for ads. If you paid for ads, they'd put your press photos in there. If they put your press photos in there, people would check that and be like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was like the social media.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I wrote for a bunch of those papers for a period of time, both in Melbourne and Brisbane and Sydney. And that kind of just gets you into a few different opportunities.
And that's the thing, man. I think people have started to realise this, but DJs have known this for a long time. You don't need to have one revenue stream. You need to do a bunch of different things to stay happy.
Yeah.
DJs have always known that. They're like, I'm going to play a gig here, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to maybe do this other thing, and then, to try and keep yourself creatively happy.
Yeah, I've always said to younger DJs, create your own empire. That's what you have to do. You can't just rely on doing gigs. You need to be writing for street press. You need to be doing radio. You need to be networking with the record labels. You need to put on your own nights. Whatever it is, create your own empire. I think that's
run
really
a one-off
important.
Party, do all that sort of
create
stuff.
a brand.
Yeah, for sure. That is super important for, I think, anyone now. You've got to have a brand, you know? But I think DJs knew that a long time ago.
Absolutely,
because just being the best music selector with the best collection doesn't put you ahead of the rest.
No, that's right.
Yeah, I think people were onto it early.
And I was lucky that I was good. I practiced a lot. I was always messing around with double copies of records. So technically, I always felt pretty comfortable on the turntables, like being able to handle records. Item showed me that part of how to actually scratch, how to flip two copies and make it look pretty natural. So I think that does help as well, because people see me DJ and they kind of know that, I can do it.
For sure. And then as you pick up more and more gigs, you become better because you start to see what people react to, how the crowd works, they like this song, they don't like this song, and you're practicing on the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's the biggest part, I think, is like getting that experience and seeing what people dig.
Yeah.
So while all this is happening, are you still doing production stuff? Obviously, everything's happening in Melbourne without you there.
Yeah. That's interesting, because when I moved to Brisbane, I didn't take my studio with me. So no, that's when I stopped doing a lot of production. I did a little bit with a group called Decipher up in Brisbane. Shout outs to Dino, who would go on to work with the Resin Dogs. It was really amateur stuff. It was some of their really early tracks. But essentially, production was not something that I really craved. I just wanted to DJ.
The performance.
Yeah, I didn't want to be defined as a producer. I wanted to be defined as a DJ. And I think that still rings true to this day. I've done a few little bits and pieces over the years, but it's not been hugely important to me. My heroes are people like Steinsky and Double D and this whole sort of cut and paste layering of music. I love that stuff. That's I just did
a collage of.
Yeah, I love how two sounds can fit together and connect, and then you can change the whole dynamic of that piece of music. So I wasn't really compelled to follow production, but in that sense, yeah. And it was interesting because I did leave Melbourne at a time when Trem then had to go off and kind of, he ended up working with Item and then started working with Prowler and then had his journey, and Brad did similar
Were you staying
things.
connected to these guys? Did you call each other?
Not as much as I should have, and that's probably my own fault because, they were really, really close friends of mine, but I was young and had itchy feet and wanted to go travel. I wanted to see Brisbane and needed to forge my own path. I'd stay in touch with them a little bit, but I probably, it's just I was a young guy forging my own life.
Doing your own thing.
And so were they.
And I guess you'd kind of hear whispers that they're doing this or they're doing that. You know, like it's early days of the internet, like
Before the internet.
before. So
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
before the
And
internet.
look, I'd go down to Melbourne on occasion and connect with them, but I didn't really go down to Melbourne all that often.
Yeah. Did you move back to Melbourne before you go to Sydney?
No.
Just went straight to Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because obviously I'm a pretty Melbourne focused person, but so many people just feel like they'll always come back here. But
That's yet to happen. That could still happen. And like,
true.
No, I went to Sydney. That just seemed like the next step. I had outgrown Brisbane, and it was time to embark on the next chapter.
So Sydney, and that's obviously somewhere where you've spent a bit of time, I guess.
Yeah, I've been there for well over 20 years. It'd be 25, maybe longer. I can't even recall at this point.
But in this journey, in this timeline, when you moved there, where are we now? Mid 90s.
Yeah, I guess it might be 96, 97. 97, I think I moved to Sydney.
Interesting time for music. Interesting time for culture.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was by that point playing a lot of different music, playing a lot of drum and bass, a lot of breaks. That's when a lot of those scenes started to really be cultivated. I was, I guess, a known commodity in those worlds.
So you go down to Sydney, you're like, look, I'm a professional DJ from Brisbane. This is what I do. And who gets you in there, or you just go in there and knock down the doors yourself?
Well, I'd done a couple of trips down to Sydney. I was in Brisbane. I was in a band called Step It Up, which was a jazz funk band. So I was the turntablist. This was pretty early on. This is at a time where bands weren't really known to have DJs as synonymously as that would become.
Late 90s, it became a thing.
Yeah, everyone had a DJ. It's funny because I did that. Catch went on to form the Resin Dogs around that time as well. So I had the opportunity to travel to Sydney. We did some supports. Did the Gil Scott Heron gig in Sydney. We put out an album on One Movement, which was a local Sydney label. So I'd had a bit of a taste of what was happening in Sydney. And then I think my two connections in Sydney were the drum and bass scene. There's a crew in Sydney called Jungle Massive Australia who really embraced me. And I just kind of slotted into what those guys were doing. They were really big proponents for drum and bass in Sydney. I loved playing drum and bass because I could sort of bring this hip hop aesthetic to it and mix drum and bass in a way that other drum and bass DJs couldn't.
You were scratching as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Would you bring the hip hop element, the scratching, to all your different genres?
Yeah, it always
People love that stuff.
It always creeps in. So there was the JMA connection, Jungle Massive Australia, and Joe 90, who was the guy that used to run the Vibes on a Summer's Day festivals. He had come up to Brisbane at some point and done a guest spot at a club that I was running with Johnny Griffin, and we connected. So when I moved to Sydney, he was kind of my next mentor. He took me under his wing. He was a well-known DJ in Sydney, really early on in the rave scene. Obviously established probably the first music festival in Australia, Vibes on a Summer's Day. So I was privileged to play all of those.
Since its inception.
Apart from the first year, I didn't do the first. That was a Melbourne. I was in Melbourne at that point. But he really took me under his wing. I guess he sort of took over from where Johnny Griffin didn't, when I moved away from Brizzy.
Different musical landscape or different hospitality landscape, Sydney to Brisbane and to Melbourne. They're all very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Venues are just different culture.
Yeah, but Joe 90 was putting on a lot of different events. We were doing a lot of breaks nights that were really popular at the time. When breaks was super interesting before it became really, samey. And it was great. It was really cool. It was a real introduction to the underground club scene in Sydney.
And then so you get there, you're doing the underground stuff. Are you doing more commercial things just to get by? Is that like the necessary evil?
I think I'm doing a lot of bar work.
Yeah.
DJing in bars. And that would be playing like acid jazz or just groovy stuff, rare groove. And so it wasn't really commercial, but it was just bar music, I guess.
Yeah.
Did that for years and years.
And that's, I guess, it's a decent compromise for someone like yourself because you still get to select music that you like, but you're not playing it in that sort of more energetic fashion that you'd rather be.
Yeah, it's a means to an end. You know, you've got to make a living, I guess, as a DJ and make some money. So you do bar work and then you do some nightclub work as well. You just do whatever there was. There was some really great clubs in Sydney at that time. Sublime was a really important club. The Chinese Laundry and the Globe. And these are venues that birthed a lot of really big name DJs in Sydney that I had the opportunity to become quite pivotal with and synonymous with. They were great sort of incubators, I guess you could say.
And are they still there, those venues?
Chinese Laundry still is. Yeah, that's been around forever. The Globe was very much kind of like Sydney's Revolver in many ways.
Is that on King's Cross there?
No, it was in the city.
Yeah, in the city.
In the city, and it was a 2-level club. And
World Bar, I'm thinking of.
World Bar was maybe a couple of years later. Yeah. So, you know, the Globe was a 2-level place. There was house in the bottom level and breaks and hip-hop upstairs. And it was an amazing club, amazing. And so I was running that for a few years, and that allowed me to really get a foothold. I mean, I think I already was quite established in Sydney by that point. But
were you trying to do Melbourne stuff, or you were doing Sydney stuff? Do you know what I mean? Were you taking?
I've always done Melbourne stuff. It's in my blood. Yeah.
But so you were taking the sort of the culture that you knew we had here from the clubs and stuff, and trying to do that, replicate that there.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Hey, because I've always been reaching those highs of seeing Ransom and Kano play at the Lounge or wherever it was, because that to me was like the epitome of local DJing. I just love seeing those guys play. So everywhere I go, I've always brought that mentality with me, I think.
Yep. You're trying to,
it's my Melbourne style. It's in my blood. It really is.
Yeah, for sure. So you do that there, and I guess when you're running the nights, you're also, you're doing a lot of stuff other than DJing. You know, you're worrying about a lot of things, the branding, what happens, and you've got to door cuts and these
putting posters up at night and
sorts of things.
Getting the designs made up and the flyers and all that kind of
which
business.
Can be fun stuff.
Yeah, loved it. That was look, it was a really tough time as well, because running the Globe at that time in Sydney around 2000, it had become Sydney's biggest club at that point. And there was a lot of the trappings of that lifestyle that, you know, you're kind of running the biggest club. You're in that club 24/7. So, yeah, it was a lot of lessons to be learned. Absolutely.
Late nights and early mornings.
Yeah.
But you're still DJing through this whole thing. And that's it. You're not thinking about, I'm going to step back and become a club owner or anything. You're like, no, I do this because I'm DJing is first and foremost what I do.
That's right. That's exactly right. I don't think I could ever stop DJing. You know, that's what I am at my core.
And this whole time, you're still digging for new music in all sorts of different genres.
Yeah.
That's the thing then. Like, with you're following you online, I see that you are staying up to date with a lot of different fucking genres. You're not sticking to your one lane. It must be tiring sometimes.
It's all in my name, Frenzie, I guess.
Yeah. But it's a lot of digging though, man. Like, I don't know, it's not physical digging anymore, but there's still trawling, you know?
Yeah. But that's part of it. You're always looking for different music. You want to play stuff that other DJs aren't necessarily playing, or play things in ways that other DJs hadn't really thought about. Blending those records together in interesting ways. Yeah. So, and you know, I was working in record stores and record labels, you know, through the week, and just, you know, had my foot in that world.
And so at this point in time, what are we talking now? Like late 90s?
Yeah, sort of mid to late 90s, I guess.
Mid to late 90s. And so how long are you at Globe for?
Until the Globe, till 2002.
Right. So that's a decent stint.
Look, so I was the DJ at the Globe for many years. I was running the Globe as an entertainment manager for about 2 years. I think, 2000 and 2002.
And doing it the way you wanted to do it?
Yeah. trying to appease the investors who are, a bunch of lawyers who were cashed up that had no idea that they were running or that they owned Sydney's biggest underground club at the time.
Right.
They just wanted to see a profit. That ended up going a bit sour.
Creative differences?
Yeah, you could call it that. Yeah.
Because you want to keep the artistic integrity of the venue and they're just worried about the bottom line.
Well, yeah, it got to a point where the whole venue was very expensive to run. Our Fridays and Saturdays were keeping the doors open, but they needed to have other nights happening and they were worried about their day trade, and they made decisions to renovate the venue and do things that weren't really aligned with what we were doing at night time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they eventually wanted to take the venue in a different direction. Mm-hmm. I jumped off, and they were shut 2 months later. So
sucked in. So what do you do on your journey after that? Then when you leave there,
just playing other clubs.
So playing other clubs. You've already at that stage you've got enough, credibility points that you can just go DJ. You don't have to worry about the ins and outs of running the place. You can just go DJ here, DJ there, and leave the stress behind. Yeah,
I think immediately after the Globe shut, I was offered a position to run some nights at the Chinese Laundry, which I did for a little while, for maybe a year or so. Eventually that kind of just peters out and changes direction, and that's quite okay. And I just kept playing at various venues and doing what I do.
Just keep on keeping on.
Yeah, you know how it is.
Oh, man. So then, but music is changing a bit as well. Like, so you're still keeping in line with what you want to do? You're not doing the cheesy sort of stuff at this stage?
Well, it depends who you talk to, because I guess some people might say I play cheese. I like to play, if I'm going to play something cheesy, I like to play it in a context that's interesting. Mm-hmm. So I might mix something interesting around it. But no, I'm not doing club retro kind of nights or whatever. Yeah. That would come later. But
well, you've got to do what you've got to do. But yeah.
I've always had a love for the music that I play, though.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you can say to some people, like, there's 80s music, right? But then there's cool 80s music.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? See, this is the thing with people. Music gets stuck in. People get, like, I think Spotify or something is probably to blame, where they go, well, this is what 80s music is. You're like, no, that's not. That's just one little fucking bit of 80s music. You know what I mean?
It's really been interesting, because in recent years I've been playing a lot of synth pop and revisiting the music that I grew up on as a kid, listening to FM radio, listening to Eon FM or Fox FM in Melbourne or whatever it was, and revisiting those tunes and buying those 12 inches again and playing them out. And I love it. It's great. And we've had a really great response at the various nights that we do in Sydney, playing this 80s pop music, but playing it in really interesting ways.
Yep.
And I think that's something that Ransom taught me when he was doing his Pop Rocks nights here in Melbourne at the Toff, that went on for, 10 years or more. I'd go along to see Ransom play, and he'd be like, you've caught me playing the worst music in the world. But he would play this music like no other DJ. Uh-huh. It was just super interesting to see how he would blend those songs together.
Yeah, well, I guess if you're getting those original 12s, there's extended mixes and all sorts of stuff that you're not getting with the radio edit.
Yeah,
so that
that's
gives you
right.
More,
the dubs, the remixes. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the one of the beauties of the 12s. But then it seems to be now, it's just everything goes in fucking cycles. But 45s is now like a huge thing, and you're right into that too.
Yeah, I have been, absolutely. That was a funny one, because I sort of fell into 45s through necessity. I did a bunch of gigs around the world some years ago and needed to take records, but I wasn't really prepared to take 12 inches because it's just too heavy. So I took 45s and scored some gigs at some really, really cool 45 nights around the world. Mm-hmm. Look, I'm not playing a whole lot of 45s these days. I did for many years. I think I inspired a lot of DJs in Australia to pick up 45s again. But I still love playing 12 inches. Mm-hmm. I want those long mixes, hey? I want those dubs.
Yeah, you got to be on your toes when playing the 45.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different way of DJing. You really have to concentrate on your programming and be really quick on the mark with your mixing.
You can't get distracted by someone talking to you.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, and just the way you handle records. So, and I do like that. I really like that it makes DJing simple again. You don't have the effects of Serato. You can't lean into any of those crutches. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Let's tell us about this world tour. When you played.
Well, I'm not going to call it a world tour, but I traveled the world with my wife and took it as an opportunity to do a bunch of gigs at the same time. And that was great. Connected with DJ Platten over in San Francisco. He was running a night called the 45 Sessions, which was, I guess, probably one of the leading 45 nights at that time around the world. So I did that. That was amazing. I played Mobile Mondays in New York, in Manhattan, which was a great club. Once again, all 45s. And that's the kind of club where Biz Marquee would come and hang out. And, you know, the guys from Digging in the Crates, you know, Lord Finesse would just go and hang out there, or Large Pro. This particular night that I played Mobile Mondays a couple of times now, but the first time I did it with King Shamik, who was the producer DJ for Twin Hype, who you might remember from the late 80s. I had a track called Do It to the Crowd. That was kind of a big hip house crossover thing. That was a huge track. That was an amazing night and a dream come true in many ways, getting to DJ in New York and having people in the audience who were kind of like known people. And it was really funny. I've got this amazing photo. I was playing a Tough Crew 7-inch at the time, and this guy comes over to me, and he's like, "What? You got Tough Crew on 45? That's amazing." His mind was just blown. And I was like, whatever, I'm kind of just trying to do my mix. And later on, my wife said, "You know who that was? That was Young Guru, which is Jay-Z's producer." You know,
yeah, Young Guru is awesome.
Man. Yeah.
And you didn't know?
No, I didn't. Well, I was concentrating on the gig. And I've got that snapped on as a photo with Young Guru just kind of blowing his mind while I'm DJing.
Yeah. Well, that is a whole thing with the 7-inch stuff, because a lot of stuff was never pressed on that. Yeah. Right? And then I don't know, people I guess are making bootlegs, but it's a whole new game. Like, because there's some songs would never get that, they just would never put out like that. Yeah, well, it's interesting because a lot of 45s, like you'd source 45s from radio stations in Germany or something, you know, they would press, there'd be weird stuff that got pressed up overseas that never got released in the States. Like a lot of hip hop got pressed up in Europe that never got released on 45 in the States. Just for radio play, or just because people hadn't adapted to CDs, maybe? Different markets, different. Oh, it would have been pre-CDs. Yeah. You know, they were servicing radio stations in Berlin or whatever it was. And so you could get those 45s on eBay or wherever, or just digging in the field or wherever it is. People get hooked on that stuff, though, don't they? Absolutely, yeah. I mean, nowadays you can buy anything on a 45. Like, they just press up everything. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that shouldn't be pressed up on 45s. So when you do these 45 nights, are they genre-specific, or it doesn't matter as long as you're playing 45s? It doesn't matter. Yeah, nights like the 45 Sessions, you know, you'd watch DJ Platten mixing in Elton John into, I don't know, something, De La Soul or something like that. Yeah. They were amazing and super clean, super clean. And it's all that stuff's about preparation and organisation, really, isn't it? You don't have time to be fucking fondling through your catalogue there. You've got to know what you... Well, we're all, like any DJ that plays 45s, we're just complete nerds. Really, that's the end, you know, that's the end of the story right there. 45 geeks. Yeah. After that, let's get back on your journey. So you're in Sydney, you do the club stuff, you're doing different nights. Where are you going from there? I think radio is something that we haven't really spoken about that's really, really important to me. Yeah. You know, I've been doing my radio show in Sydney for 23 years, Groove Therapy. Which probably fits into the timeline there. Yeah, as well. Yeah. So I started that in 2002. I have bounced around a lot of radio stations in both Melbourne, Brisbane and Sydney before that. My first radio show was in Melbourne, bringing it back to the Melbourne connection. 3CR, so the same station that DJ C used to do his show on.
there was a guy called P Jam who was a really well-known friend of all of ours in the hip-hop scene in Melbourne. And he had a show on 3CR. He used to go into Chrissy's show as well and DJ C's show. So he had a show on 3CR, and he gave me the opportunity to take it over. I'd fill in for him from time to time, and then eventually I took over his show before I moved to Brisbane. And that was amazing. Loved it. Just loved being on radio, playing on radio. I did a little stint at 3PBS as well. It was great. Just loved it. Brisbane, did 4ZZZ up in Brisbane for the 4 years I was up there. In Sydney, I played at probably 6 or 7 radio stations before I landed at 2SER. So I've always done radio. That's always kind of been this side thing that I've done.
And one thing that when you do your radio gigs, and this is someone like myself with a bit of a DJ background, not that I'm comparing myself to you, but you want to always make sure the songs are mixed well, which is something that always kind of irks me a bit.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. Yeah. I've always strived to be a really, really clean DJ. And it just annoys the crap out of me if I botch a mix up, particularly on radio. So I don't do that these days. You know what I mean? I've been doing it long enough that I actually know how to mix records. But yeah, you have to be really, because it amplifies the mistakes, radio. If you make a mistake in the club, you can get away with it because of the reverberation of the room. You might not, the people in the crowd might not necessarily hear that bodgy mix or whatever. But on radio, because of the medium, it's super clean. You can hear every mistake.
Yeah. So and that's something you've always prided yourself with. You're like, yep, everything's going to be mixed. Not only is the selection going to be good, but it's all going to sound nice. And then you've got to worry about pushing the buttons and talking, man.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got a few tricks up my sleeve these days. And quite often I'm really, being a student of like people like Double D and Steinsky, I love doing these master mixes where I'm just going a little bit crazy on the edits. And so a lot of that stuff will be pre-produced at home. Mm-hmm. And then I'll just go in and play it. And
when you say pre-produced, are you mixing it at home, or are you going to mix it like in a DAW or something?
Yeah, in a DAW. Yeah, I'll be, in some episodes I'll be mixing, 4 or 5 songs over the top of one another or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But not all, I don't do that every week, but I love doing that. That really excites me. So that's, some of the tricks of the trade, I guess.
Yeah. Tell us about some of the people that you've interviewed with these radio shows, man.
Yeah, well, Groove Therapy has never really been a big interview show. It's always been more about me, just creating mixes. But around COVID, if we jump forward a few years, I did do another radio show with a good friend of ours, Oblivious. Mm-hmm. And that was more of an interview show. So that happened through a radio station in New Zealand called Bass FM. Great radio station that was really important to the New Zealand dance music community.
Yep.
When COVID happened, a lot of their DJs couldn't provide content for Bass FM. So they reached out to DJs in Australia to create shows. So Oblivious took the bait. And
hey, man, let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah. Signed himself up for a radio show, but insisted that I had to do it with him. Yeah. And so we did this radio show called The Low End Theory, which was the worst name in the world. In retrospect, as soon as we settled on the name, we knew it was a bad idea.
The artwork was cool.
Well, that was the only reason why we kept the name. I think Mexi had done this amazing logo for us that we felt compelled to do it, to keep using the name. We should have just called it the Shan and OB show, I think. Yeah. But anyway, so we start doing this radio show on Bass FM. It's a big hit on Bass FM. They love it. They want to keep us. So even when COVID is a done deal, they keep us on. We end up doing well over 100 interviews. It was a really different show to Groove Therapy. It was a lot of fun. It was interview focused, and we would have some really silly segments as well where I would challenge Oblivious to make like the worst blend that he could. We had a segment called Battle of the Blends. We'd pick like songs We'll challenge each other with like you have to mix Spice Girls into Fleetwood Mac or something, and make these terrible blends, and then kind of judge each other's blends. That was a lot of fun. But we ended up interviewing a lot of really cool people from around the world.
Heaps.
Yeah, Femi Kuti, Azimuth from Brazil. Who else? Raskas, Fat Boys. Just different musicians. Brian Auger, that was a really cool one. Ali Shaheed Muhammad with Adrian. What's his name? That was actually a really boring episode. That one.
How did you find doing those interviews? Because you were using Squadcast. Or whatever it was. Did you find that software good? Like
sometimes it was a bit hit and miss.
Yeah,
it was a bit frustrating if you'd record an interview and then you find out later that the technology kind of failed. That didn't happen too often, but
you're worried about the guest setup as well, right?
Yeah, that's it. So
you can have good Shure mics or whatever, and they might be using their fucking laptop mic. How do you know?
with their earbuds connected to their wired headphones, and they'd be scratching along their beards, and it would be a really horrible sound. So that did happen from time to time. But it was a great show, a really cool show. Like I said, we did well over 100 of these interviews. You can go to thelowendtheory.com.au. The archives are still up there.
Inevitably comes to an end, though.
Yeah, which is fine.
You've got enough on your plates.
That's right. I just keep doing groove therapy. Yeah, that was fine. It was a bit sad for Bass FM though, because the reason why we stopped was because Bass FM got sold and kind of changed direction. It was a really sad thing for New Zealand.
Right.
They no longer they lost a really pivotal anchor to their dance music community when Bass FM was sold.
And what are they doing now? What kind of direction?
Well, the people who bought it were some crazy religious nutters who had another radio station and pretty much immediately just used that frequency to broadcast their other radio station, which was playing commercial talkback. Whatever, I don't even know.
Did you think about taking it to a different platform?
We thought about it for 5 minutes, but COVID was, the lockdowns had started wrapping up. People were going back out again. It was, we were back to our old routines. Producing 2 radio shows a week was a pretty big job.
Yeah, for sure.
So I had enough.
Yeah, and meanwhile you're doing that, and you're doing your gigs, and you're doing your family stuff. It's a lot.
It was amazing though. I love doing that show with Oblivious. Big shout out to Oblivious. I haven't spoken about him enough in this story, but really, really dear friend of mine and amazing DJ.
Just a genuine guy. Absolutely.
One of my best mates. And, it was so much fun doing that radio show with him. It really was.
Yeah. And it's hard not to, he's such an energetic person. It's hard not to, it's infectious. You know what I mean? Like you just have a good time when you're around him because he's just like so fucking excited.
And I'm such an introvert. So it was kind of like polar opposites.
It was a good dynamic.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And, man, he's probably one of the hardest working DJs that has a full-time job, I'd say, in the country.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't stop, and he'll say yes to any gig that he wants to.
Absolutely.
Play.
And there's a really beautiful innocence to his personality that he just takes it all on, and he doesn't care about what he plays in the way that so many other DJs do.
He'll figure out a way to have fun playing whatever you tell him to.
Yeah.
If you said, hey, you got to play nursery rhymes, he's like, oh man, I got a whole creative nursery rhymes. I've been wanting to do that for ages, He'll find a fun way to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's a legend. And he's been on your show, so people should go check out his episode.
They should, man. That was a long...
Yeah, one of your first guests, I think.
Yeah, it was episode 7 or something, man. So that's 120 episodes ago or something. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah, check out DJ Oblivious's episode.
But we had some great guests. Another really good episode was Paris and Peril. Mm-hmm. Even though we would interview mostly people from overseas, producers and musicians from overseas, there were a couple of really good Melbourne personalities. We got Ransom on the show, which was super rare because Ransom just doesn't do interviews.
No.
That was a great show.
Did he do that just because you go so far back?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because of the history that we have. Mm-hmm. And my regret with that is, even though we had an amazing interview with him, his story is so big. Like, just we just couldn't get into all of it.
Yeah. So many
So
times.
it's up to you. You have to get him on the show.
Tell him.
Phil, where's the camera? Yeah, get on the show. Yeah.
There's so many people like, oh man, you got to get Ransom. I'm like, of course I've asked him, and he just politely says, hey man, yeah, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Into it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But so many people say you should get him on, and it'd be amazing because not only was he there from the start, he's still doing that week in, week out.
Still doing it.
So that longevity is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just such an important role, figure in Melbourne. Yeah. Paris and Peril, that was a great episode too. That when we recorded an interview with those guys, they're a bunch of fun. Those guys. Paris and Peril are two people that were so important to my story as well, I guess, because growing up in high school, just taking it back through the years, I was at Camberwell High for 4 years, and then I went to Swinburne Tech at a time
Very graffiti-heavy school.
Yeah, hugely. And Paris was, I think, the year above me. So, I'd see Paris and Peril rock in, and they were just, dripping with fresh gear. They just look like the characters that they used to draw, and
just human b-boys.
Yeah, they were great. That was such a cool school to be at that time.
Well, Brendan, who was in yesterday, he went.
He was there too. Yeah. Puz, he was there, and Lemon was in the same class as me, and it was a lot of us. Yeah.
It's a real hip-hop heavy school.
Yeah, I don't think that there was there was a lot of hanging out in the Rocket Park or riding the trains, and probably not so much class time. But it was great.
Yeah, what a place to connect with people though. A lot of creatives came out of there.
Absolutely.
And the thing is that school was sort of known to be a creative school, so it drew those sort of people.
Yeah. It was really cool for me because I wasn't really settled at Camberwell High. I found that to be a really competitive school. And the great thing about Swinburne was it was just the years 11 and 12.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's funny with Camberwell High because like Camberwell's a pretty affluent area with like probably the most concentrated amount of private schools all around it.
Yeah.
And then you've got the public school, there as well.
But it was kind of run like a private school, Camberwell High. It was
right.
It was very much had that private school mentality. But there were a lot of influential writers that came through that school as well at that time. I remember, when I was in year 7 or year 8, Bondi from USA Crew, he was there, and we used to go hang out on the Oval, and he'd be sketching in our black books. Pretty sure Yuri, Prime Styles, was there at that time as well. Trust, I think he was at Camberwell High as well. So a lot of those old USA guys went through Camberwell High.
And then if you had the creative vibe, you'd sort of go to Swinburne year 11 and 12.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was funny because like the year that I did go to Swinburne, there'd be a couple of us that had come from Camberwell High to Swinburne.
Yeah. Different time back then, but that main, what's the main street down Camberwell?
Riversdale Road or Camberwell Road?
Camberwell Road. That would be a bit of a hangout then as well, man.
Yeah, Camberwell itself was. Yeah, and it's funny because I think you had someone from 3174 on here recently. And I remember the when they were talking about the time that 3174 came through Camberwell, there's like 100 of them, and they just bum rushed all the stores. I remember that night. I was in Camberwell then. That was amazing. Yeah.
Were the locals like, fuck, what's going on here?
Pretty much. Yeah. That was a big deal, having 100 kids from Noble Park like coming through Camberwell shopping centre. So, yeah.
Shake things up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I was a bit younger, but that was a real hangout. And a lot of people that I knew that went out there, that you'd just go to Camberwell Road, whatever it was, and just fucking, on a Friday, and it was just like a lot of kids around, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And, behind the shops there was some seating that we'd just all kind of hang out at and cause trouble, and the cops would come and kick us off and make us move along.
Run back to the station.
Yeah, that's right. And then you just end up doing loops on the various train lines.
Good times. So let's get back on your journey. So where are we now? We're in Sydney. We're
all over the place, to be honest.
We're all over the place. Well, let's try and let's go back to Sydney, right? And your DJing career. let's say, where are we now? So mid 2000s.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the radio show is going really well at that point. I'm playing a lot of clubs, doing the festivals. Breaks is really big at that point. Probably not playing too many hip hop gigs in that moment.
Is that because it's not the flavour at the moment?
Yeah, I think I sort of lost the passion for hip hop around 2002. I wasn't really feeling a lot of the hip hop that was coming out at that time.
It's kind of like the fucking 50 Cent era.
Yeah, I grew to appreciate that music in a big way in the years since. I really like a lot of that music now, but at that point, I was more interested in playing breaks and drum and bass and just interesting stuff. And that's where the action was in the clubs and the festivals. So I was making a bit of a name for myself in that world until it became really kind of samey. And I got pigeonholed in that breaks world for a minute.
Yeah.
I was doing stuff with Fat Dex, touring with Leonardo, who was a local Sydney producer. That was that would have been happening around that time too.
Still coming back to Melbourne and periodically visiting?
Not very often. I think, Leonardo and myself did some shows down in Melbourne that, we reconnected with Tram and Brad and all those boys.
Because they had formed LC by this stage.
It would have been pretty early on.
Yeah.
But I never got back to Melbourne as often as I should.
Yep.
That was a regret of mine. I should have come down here more often.
Did you miss it though, man?
Yeah, absolutely.
You did?
Yeah. But I had my own life. There was work and girlfriends at the time and whatnot. That commitments, radio shows. I always commit myself to just stuff that locks me into.
That's a huge thing. When you put yourself down for a weekly radio show, it's hard to piss off anywhere else. Isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, nowadays the radio show the radio station affords me a lot of freedom. I've been there for so long; they just let me do whatever I want these days. So I can. Do the show from home and just send it in, which is inevitably what I do these days.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But that takes a while to build up that sort of stuff. And I guess the technology wasn't there in the early 2000s to even really do that.
Yeah.
So in the mid 2000s, from a DJing standpoint, digital really sort of takes off. Serato comes out and it's all Tractor for you.
Yeah. I went Tractor. I don't know why.
Tractor seemed to be more of the dance music side of it, and Serato seemed to be more hip hop. That's kind of the vibe I got.
Look, I think for me I've always been a bit of a computer geek. So Tractor was really customizable. I could really get my hands dirty behind the scenes with it. And for those people that don't know what we're talking about, they're the programs, the computer programs that DJs were using and still do. Serato and Tractor. Yeah, exactly.
Vinyls.
Yeah. So you'd get your box and you connect it up to your turntables and your laptop, and then the records would talk to the computer. So I went Tractor, and I used that for many, many years, and I still do. I never really fell in love with Serato. I just never really liked it. I found it really clunky, and never liked the interface. Just didn't have as much cool shit as Tractor did. So sometimes I felt like the only DJ in the world using Tractor. And it was always awkward in those changeover periods where, all the DJs before me are using Serato, and then here I come with my clunky Tractor box, and I'm having to do the cable swap thing. But it's kind of make it work.
It is what it is. And I think they're all interchangeable sort of now. Or Denon came out with one that you could sort of use.
Yeah. Sometimes I think they're still locked into their various systems. But it was kind of funny because some years ago, I would take all the DJs these days are playing USB sticks, which to me is a bit of a cop out.
Yep.
And I'm sorry for any of those DJs who were using USB. Sorry, OB. But
he carried his laptop for years.
Yeah, he did. I can't do it. I need to look like I'm working. You can't just turn up to a gig with your headphones and a USB stick. That to me doesn't feel like DJing.
The thing is that I will go and say it's positive about the USB, aside from the laptop kind of gives you
A visual cue.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, no, but it gives you something, a barrier, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
right, to
And
hide
something
behind.
to look in,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
So I feel like with and this is just from my commercial DJing sort of stuff, you got your two CDJs, you got your two USB things, right? And then you're connecting with the crowd. You've got your laptop, you're kind of doing this, you've got a screen in between you, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, sometimes I felt like a bit of a dinosaur though, because all the kids were playing their USB sticks, and then I'd turn up with my clunky laptop and this box, like it's from the previous century, and
then you got to worry about somewhere to put the laptop.
yeah, you got to find exactly. You got to pull out your clunky stand and all this kind of business. And I remember one time this kid DJ before me, he was really young. He must have been 18 or 19. And I'm connecting my vinyl to my laptop, and he's like, "Oh, you're still playing the vinyl decks?" I'm like, "Yeah, man." And he was just really blown away that I wasn't using digital. Like it was almost like he'd never seen vinyl before, and that was digital vinyl.
Yeah, I know. People don't. Yeah, people would come up to you and go, "Oh, you're playing."
But he was the DJ before me.
Well, yeah. But man, there's sometimes that kids that have played before me leave their USB sticks there, right? And I'd be like, "All right, let's have a look and see what this guy's got."
Right.
And I'd have a look, and they might only have like 30 songs, and you're like, "What are you gonna do after that?"
Yeah, yeah,
You know, like,
yeah. Well, there's some good and bad to that, I guess, because now that I play so much more vinyl again, and eventually, for whatever reason, I just went back to playing vinyl. And I love the fact that when I take out 2 bags of records, I only have that many records. And
You've got the constraint.
I have to make it work. Whereas Tractor, you've got every song in the world, and it just got too easy.
Yeah. And then it opens you up to the possibilities of when people come and ask for songs and you're like, "No, we're not doing that." And they're like, "Just type it into your little fucking computer there." And
Can't you just download it?
yeah. You got Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it does. It opens you up to different situations though with the laptop. But it seems to be something that you just roll with, and that's
I did, and I was really big into using Tractor for many years, and I still pull it out on occasion. But
have you tried the Serato stems thing?
No, I should do that. I don't think my laptop would be powerful enough.
I haven't tried it either, but people say it's pretty.
It's pretty cool, isn't
it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for someone like you that likes to do a lot of different stuff,
Layering and things, yeah.
It could be something to look at.
My laptop is pretty old. I've got this little 11-inch. It's tiny, which I love because it's such a small footprint. I don't want to have a big screen in front of me. I want something just small and discreet. Yeah. But that's from 2011. It's in a little Apple MacBook, and I know that eventually that'll die, and touch wood, and then I don't know what I'll do. I'll probably just go back to playing records completely.
I wonder if you can do it with like a tablet now.
Probably could. Yeah. Probably could.
Like a tablet with like a SSD drive connected to that to store all your music or something.
Yeah.
Technology, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
You embrace it though? Like you like the digital side of it?
Yeah, I do. I think it's exciting. But I'm a purist. Well, I'm a purist at the same time. I love playing vinyl records. That's really important to me. I think any DJ that goes digital needs to have that background of having come playing vinyl, because I just see so many young kids, young DJs these days who are just completely digital, that really miss some of the fundamentals of what DJing is about. So I think you kind of have to pay your dues before you go digital.
But it's also it's an era thing. It's an age thing. It's where they've grown up, and that's why those kids that do that and go in completely digitally, they won't even touch the platter of a CDJ because they don't know that that's emulating a record. Yeah. So they will just they'll put it on the not vinyl mode, whatever the other one is, and just sort of.
Yeah, press the buttons, press the sync button.
It's like when that CD player came out, well, not CD player, whatever it is all just fucking velocity pads. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
I thought that was a joke at first.
They got those CD players that don't even take CDs anymore. Yeah.
The XDJs. I got a couple of those. Apparently there's a video at your house recorded of the early days of RFK dudes, and there was some early recordings there making some music. Is this true?
Yeah. I know those videos. I wish they never were on the internet.
Are they on the internet?
They are on the internet.
Really?
Yeah. So they were, one of the fellas in RFK took the footage.
Yeah.
And it's me and Mad Hat, and Mad Hat's doing a rhyme, and I'm doing some beats at home, and there's another one. Look, hey, that was all part of growing up. I mean, the internet wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah. Thought it was a private movie collection.
Yeah. It's funny because I actually don't remember those videos from the time, but when they surface, well, that's me. That's my room.
Yep.
That's me doing that thing.
I didn't know that they were on the internet. I just thought someone had some copies of them because apparently there's some of Trem and Strut in those sort of at your place as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Might be different.
Well, people get excited, I guess. Like, I'm happy to let those songs and that video footage just fade away. But some people get excited by who's in those videos, I guess. And they want to see, they want a little taste of what Brad was doing back then or what Trem was doing. Yeah. I don't think Brad and Trem would be too excited about it.
No, but, the internet's a funny thing, man. Like, there's a lot of stuff that you may not want out there, and it fucking gets out there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
This is the day and age we live in.
I'll see how I feel about this particular interview.
You message me next week, Maloney, take it down, man. Nah,
it is what it is.
It is what it is. And look, I don't like looking at myself either. I make myself do it twice a week for fucking the purposes of this. But I think it's important that people document their stuff.
And and that's very true because I think Melbourne has a really unique story, and that's something that really is at the core of who I am. Even though I've lived in Brisbane and Sydney, I do have this really strong affinity to Melbourne. And growing up in Melbourne at the time that I did was so important to me. Mm-hmm. Like just being able to come up at that time when we were all discovering hip hop, getting to hang out with the people I hung out with. Like, wow, I wouldn't want it any other way.
Mm-hmm. And even though you've lived in Sydney for more than 20 years, people say, hey, where are you from? Do you say Melbourne?
Melbourne.
You always do.
I live in Sydney, but I'm from Melbourne. I'm a Melbourne boy. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's awesome. And do you think you'd be in Sydney forever?
No, I think, you're down here on the peninsula. I think the peninsula is calling. I've always had a bit of a connection to the peninsula. That could be in my future. We'll see. We'll see.
Come join the creative crew down
there.
Yeah.
And now I have a little boy that I'm looking, that I'm raising and getting into dad life. That could be on the horizon.
Dude, my son went to kinder here, right? One day a week he goes to kinder up at the top of what's it called? The Arthur Seat.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right, he does that at kinder one day a week, and you get to see the whole bay.
Awesome.
Right? There's kangaroos jumping past. All this sort of stuff. Like, that's just his normal day of kinder.
Yeah.
And you're like, that stuff's not happening in the city.
No, the peninsula is so beautiful. And even 10 minutes drive into the peninsula, into the central part of the peninsula, it's just so nice.
Yeah, man.
All that farmland.
Good spot to be.
Yeah.
As we get close to wrapping it up, man, do you want to tell us like what gigs you've got coming up or anything you've got, the radio show, anything you want to sort of plug at all?
Yeah. What gigs are coming up? Look, I don't know. There's always gigs coming up. I'm at that point where I'm really lucky that I get a lot of cool gigs coming my way. And that's something that we haven't really spoken about is the fact that, I had the opportunity to kind of DJ for a lot of different overseas acts.
Let's talk about it, man. It's not too late. Do you want to drop some names?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big thrills of my career was DJing for ultramagnetic MCs, which was really funny because I had DJed for Cool Keith in Sydney under the Dr. Octagon name.
Yeah, he had so many different aliases.
Yeah, but I mean, that was a really big one, obviously. Everyone loves Dr. Octagon, and that was a real thrill because of who he was. And then a couple of years later, I got to DJ for ultramagnetic MCs, not just at the gig, but for them. And that was a real buzz because I absolutely love those guys. And that day, the day of the gig, I'd heard that they'd done Melbourne the night before. And I'd heard the Melbourne show was a real disaster and that the local DJs that they got in Melbourne, I don't know who they were.
Was this like 2003?
Maybe.
Because I think I was working at was it at Metro? Or that
I don't know. But these two guys, I heard and I hope, sorry if they're listening, they were taking their tops off.
Oh, right. Yeah.
These two guys, Melbourne, and it was all a bit of a circus. So the Melbourne show kind of got panned on social media. So I thought, look, I can't let that happen. I can't let that happen in Sydney. I'm going to just go in there and do my thing. And it was amazing. Like, it was just incredible, DJing for Ultramag. At the end, they did a really great show. At the end of the show, I just put on some doubles, just double copies of my own records because they had given me the tunes to play for their show. But I got to freestyle. They just freestyled for maybe another hour or something stupid over my records. It was incredible. Loved it.
Crowd interaction.
Yeah,
like
it was mad.
throwing Sydney in there and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
You know, I've got some great photos of me DJing with them in front of me. It's those moments that make it feel like, I've just had some incredible experiences.
Yeah. All those bar gigs don't matter when you're doing
No, exactly. Slum Village DJ'd for those guys.
Wow. What year was that?
I think that must have been around 2015 or thereabouts. I can't quite recall.
Yeah.
There's been a bunch of acts that I've actually DJ'd for.
Yeah. But they're touring and they're just not bringing their tour DJ.
That's right. Yeah.
We're a long way away from the rest of the world in a lot of capacities.
Yeah, man. So it's easier just to get someone local who can do it.
And I guess you've got the reputation that, all right, Shan's not going to fuck this up. He's going to do a good job. He's a good DJ, and we can trust him.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And he's going to keep his shirt on.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to keep my shirt on. Yeah.
That's an extra if we're going to have to take my shirt off.
That's right. That incurs more payment.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, man, is there anyone you want to shout out as we get close to wrapping it up?
Look, I'm going to shout out all my old Melbourne friends. You know, Ray's Trem, all the RFK guys, Epic,
Sab.
Cam and Mick, Sab, Len One, all those boys. Mad Hat. NES Styles. I mean, he's been a great friend over the years.
He's still doing a radio show.
He is. And funnily enough, Ennio does Triple R on Friday afternoons at the exact same time that I do my radio show.
Radio Wars.
Yeah, well, we've often spoke about doing some kind of collaborative show together, an episode where I guess it would have to be recorded ahead of time, but something that we can kind of broadcast in both cities at the same time.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which could be kind of a bit of fun.
Yeah.
We might have to do that this year at some point.
Yeah.
I think we last spoke about it and then COVID happened, so that put the brakes on it. But look, all those guys, just amazing friends growing up here in Melbourne and just really dear to me. And it was just a lot of an amazing experience living in Melbourne, growing up in Melbourne at that time.
Man, even though you've been out of here for a long time, you're a true Melburnian at heart.
Thank you.
And it's been a good chat. And I'm sure that people are going to message me and say, why didn't you ask Shan about this? Why didn't you ask Shan about that? I'm like, mate, next time.
Yeah, next time. It's nerve-wracking. Like I said earlier at the start of the interview, I'm normally on the other side of the microphone. So this is a really different dynamic for me.
Yeah. But I like to think that I'm pretty easy to talk to.
You are, but I don't feel entirely comfortable being on this side of the microphone. It happens, hey.
All right, man. Let's wrap it up.
It's been a lot of fun, mate. It's been great.
Cheers. No, I appreciate you taking the time. It's been a lot of fun. And hopefully, we can do it again. We'll do a Shan Part 2 soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Maloney.
Cheers, man.